We're starting a class in Halacha. We're going to try to cover whatever we can in the 45 minutes that we have. And I didn't know whether or not we should take a topic that's massive and really requires more than one meeting, or I should choose something that's very specific that I can cover it in one night. But I decided I would talk about Tefillin tonight. And I looked into 3 different Sfarim, all of which have chapters about Tefillin. I'll show them to you so you'll know what the literature is. One is a very, very fine piece of work. I'm sure you've heard of it, called Surma Mirabanan. He's got entire sections here on Tefillin. Then there's a sefer called Pninei Halacha by Rav Malamed. Also has quite a few chapters about Tefillin. And then we have Rav Yitzchak Mirsky in his Hegyoni Halacha. He has a whole bunch on Tefillin. Now, I made a list of topics in Tefillin of each one of these 3 Sfarim. And the average number of topics breaks down to about 15 different topics. So obviously, for tonight, we can't cover all 15. We'll decide if you want to continue with Tefillin, or we could put it off for 6 months from now, whenever it is. So choosing from these topics, let's say from these 15 topics, I want to choose a few that I want to really focus on tonight. The first topic is whether Tefillin is 1 mitzvah or 2 mitzvahs. And that's a big, gigantic controversy, and it has repercussions. In the case of tzitzis, even though you put on 4 chutim on 4 different knofos, on 4 different corners, it's all 1 mitzvah. And everybody agrees that you count it as 1 mitzvah, and therefore everyone agrees you make 1 brach. In the case of Tefillin, there's Tefillin shel yad and Tefillin shel rosh. The Gemara says that Eino ma'ak v'zu. So if you only had one and at the other, you can put them on. That's what you'll do.
You couldn't put them on.
You could, you would. Because Eino ma'ak, you don't need the shel rosh to fulfill the shel yad, or vice versa. Now, if you assume that Tefillin is 1 mitzvah made up of 2 parts of shel yad and shel rosh, then it would make sense that one should be ma'akiv the other. If, on the other hand, you can put on tefillin shel yad without the tefillin shel rosh, and vice versa, that would indicate that it's 2 separate mitzvahs. So the bulk of the evidence favors in, or kicks in favor of saying that there are 2 mitzvahs in taryag, and that's how they should be counted. Since it's only counted as 1, because if you have only 3 chutim on 3 corners of your garment, you're not yotze the mitzvah. You need all 4, so it's 1 mitzvah. On the other hand, in the case of tefillin, you could have one without the other, and therefore it should be counted as 2 separate mitzvahs. According to those monei mitzvahs that counted as 1 mitzvah, you might be tempted to say that there should be 1 bracha on both the tefillin shel yad and the tefillin shel rosh. And the Shulchan Aruch paskins that you should only make 1 bracha. However, the Ramah says you should make 2 brachas. So this becomes a controversy as, what's your minhag? You make 2 brachas? I make 1 also.
The growth
on both?
Yeah. Once in my life,
that's it. I don't make
one time in my life, I made a second bracha, al mitzvahs tefillin on my shel rosh, because I was mafsik. And again, even though it wasn't my fault that I had to be mafsik, it was urgent, so I made it separate. But other than that, my whole life, I've been putting on tefillin for quite a while. I only make 1 bracha.
I mean, I get maybe it's a little bit. I don't understand the svar of the second bracha. Of why we say baruch Shem. Once you say it's a safek bracha,
right? The Gemara says the following in Mesechet Menachos: Lo sach mevarich bracha achas. Sach, if he interrupted, then mevarich shtayim. So Rashi and all the other Rishonim, except for Rabbeinu Tam, interpreted that if there was no sicha, you only make 1 bracha.
But you said it's 2 mitzvahs.
Oh, the question is, since it's 2 mitzvahs, why don't you make 2 different brachas? Mm-hmm. And again, that would kick in favor of saying that it's 1 mitzvah with 2 parts to it, and therefore 1 bracha suffices.
Mm-hmm. Is that mainstream opinion, that mainstream practice for Ashkenazim to make 1 bracha?
I don't know about Ashkenazim. I mean, Hasidim will only make 1 bracha, and that's Nusach Hari.
Yeah.
The Gaon only makes 1 bracha, and the Sfaradim only make one bracha. So there's
Yeah.
there's a large group of people who only make one bracha. Many Ashkenazim don't know that there's someone out there in the universe who only makes one bracha. But
I think you are that it seems to be amongst my friends, and we were taught when we were kids, it was two bracha.
Yeah.
I think at least in America that is
in
kind of
Ashkenazic Jewry, unless you're brought up in a very Hasidic background, you make two brachas. How are you?
Shalom.
Shalom Aleichem. Tell me, been good, okay?
I've been practicing.
Okay, good. I just want to make sure because otherwise we could switch the grid. Now, keep in mind that when the Gemara says Sach, that if he interrupted, he's Mavarch Shtayim, Rabbeinu Tam says the following. Mavarch Shtayim means he makes two brachos on the Shal Rosh. Because since he interrupted between the Tefillin Shal Yad and the Tefillin Shal Rosh, the bracha of Laniach Tefillin, which is really on both the Shal Yad and the Shal Rosh, cannot be Chal, it cannot exempt him as far as the Tefillin Shal Rosh is concerned. So Sach now ups the ante, and instead of making one bracha, namely Al Mitzvah's Tefillin, he makes two brachas. He has to also recite Laniach Tefillin. And that's based on a principle in the Gemara in Chulin that if you shecht many animals, you only make one bracha on shechita as long as you're not mafsik from one to the other. Or for example, in B'dikas Chametz, we're going to see in Mitzvah when we get closer to Pesach that if you have two batim, or let's say you have a storage house or a holiday place or whatever it is, then the question is, can you pater up both batim with one bracha? Unless maybe halicha itself is a hefsek. But be that as it may, you can do many mitzvahs as long as they belong to the same bracha and pater them up with one bracha as long as you aren't mafsik between them. So Rabbeinu Tam is going to say that lahaniach is chal both on the Shal Yad and the Shal Rosh. However, you don't repeat the bracha on the Shal Rosh because you aren't mafsik, but lu yitzur, if you are mafsik, then you have to repeat the lahaniach, hence now you have to be Mavarch Shtayim. So the Mavarch Shtayim means not the second bracha, but two brachas on the Shal Rosh. Be that as it may, I want to talk to you a little bit about the Kedusha of Tefillin. And what kind of, how are you? Do you want to sit here? Oh, you have COVID? What? Just joking. Anyway, so what is the sanctity of Tefillin? And what mitzvahs or halachas does that generate? The Gemara compares the sanctity of tefillin to that of the tzitz. The tzitz, as you know, was worn on the forehead of the Kohen Gadol. And that had a certain level of kedusha that added to the kedusha, the basic sanctity of the Kohen Gadol. His sanctity was upgraded by the fact that he wore the tzitz. Now, the tzitz is made up of one name of God, just one, Yud K Vav K. But the kedusha, the sanctity of tzitz, is awesome in the fact that the Kohen Gadol, who you would think would not need any extra bolstering of his kedusha, and he could achieve whatever he has to achieve even without the tzitz. No. He needs the tzitz. And the one single azkar, the one single name of God on the tzitz is enough to sanctify the tzitz on the highest level. So the Gemara says the following. If tzitz, which has only one azkar, one name of Hashem, generates such a high level of kedusha, how much more so in the case of tefillin? Tefillin has approximately 26 azkaros. The name of Hashem in the four parashas of tefillin repeats itself 26 times. And therefore, the kedusha of tefillin is that much greater than that of the tzitz. How does that impact on halacha, on dinin? The kedusha of the tzitz sanctifies the Kohen Gadol. The kedusha of the tefillin sanctifies the person who's wearing it. And if he's in a high level of sanctity, then he has to behave properly. What does that mean? He's not allowed to have what's called hesech hadas. Now, it's very difficult to translate that term because there's a major controversy, two shitos in the Rishonim, as to what hesech hadas is. The Rambam holds, by virtue of the equation to tzitz, you have to have constant awareness, non-stop, as long as you're wearing the tefillin of your tefillin. And in Shulchan Aruch it says, based on the Rambam, that you have to be mamashmesh b'tfilav kol shah. That means as long as you're wearing tefillin, you have to make sure that you're connected to the tefillin. How do you connect to the tefillin? By being mamashmesh. You actually hold on to the tefillin. You touch the tefillin. And not only the tefillin shel rosh, but even the tefillin shel yad. So the Rambam has a kedusha that is sanctified by the tefillin, in which a person is on such a high level that, like the Kohen Gadol, who's not allowed to disconnect his awareness from the tzitz, so too a person who's wearing tefillin has to connect his awareness to the tzitz. Now, I don't know about you fellas, but I find that very, very difficult, very harsh, to tell me that I constantly have to be aware and connected to my tefillin. In fact, the Gemara is going to have all sugya, we'll see it soon, about whether you're allowed to eat while you're wearing tefillin. And the final maskana is that you're certainly allowed to eat what's called an achilas aroy, a temporary kind of snack. We'll talk about it a little later. Not only that, the Gemara seems to allow shenas aroy. Now imagine a person is taking a little snooze, right? He's taking a little power nap, for just a few seconds. And you're telling me that he's allowed to do that while he's wearing tefillin.
That would sound like the definition of not
Hesed Hadas.
of Hesed Hadas.
That if Hesed Hadas means that I have to have constant awareness, well, this fellow is out of it. I mean, he is falling asleep, maybe over the table. I mean, I can tell you about that a lot. And he's not aware of his tefillin.
That's why we don't wear tefillin on Shavuos.
Because what? We're falling asleep. Right.
But this does not affect whether or not a person is Yotze the mitzvah. It's just an Indian of Kedusha. So,
Correct. But on the other hand, if you're,
I'm saying
you wear it.
it's a-
I'm saying it's mitzvah ain't kavana or yetzer. What's the kavanah?
no, but I'm saying there's an Easter Hesed Hadas. Hesed Hadas is like a hafkah bittul of Kedushas tefillin. So you're right. He
Actually,
might.
the minute he puts it on, he's Yotze the mitzvah. Everything else is like kilu a bonus, so to
Right, a
speak.
kedusha, but that
Kedusha, so if he
kedusha
has Hesed
cannot be
Hadas,
violated. So if he has Hesed Hadas, he's violated that
So
kedusha.
I think we should, because of that does not negate the mitzvah, but it's still a pagam maybe.
It's a din in the kedusha.
In the tefillin, or your kedusha is effective because you're wearing the tefillin, and that the Rambam derives from tzitz. So if you need a constant awareness of your tefillin, according to the Rambam, or else you violate these Hesed Hadas, then how do you allow little snooze? How do you allow a little meal, a snack? Not only that, when you're davening, where is your mind? What are you thinking about? If all things are ideal, you're thinking about your tefillos. If you're learning Torah, and I have two grandsons who wear tefillin while they're learning Torah in the old city. I mean, they're not thinking about the tefillin; they're thinking about the sugya. So what do you say?
Sorry, Hesed Hadas defined as concentrating on something else other than tefillin, or is it just a lack of thinking of the tefillin? Because the nafkamina would be, if you go to sleep, you're not necessarily distracted thinking of something else, but you don't have the kavanah of the tefillin. Whereas if you're
Okay, maybe
doing
you're right,
something
Yudi,
else,
but
then
I
you're-
would argue that if you're eating, you're thinking about the eating. I would argue that even if you're sleeping, you're probably dreaming about something. But here we have a salvation. The Rush, in a very atypical way, quotes Rabbeinu Yonah. Rabbeinu Yonah says that what is Hesed Hadas? Hesed Hadas is schok v'kalus rosh. It means he's thinking very deeply about something that's, shall we say, antithetical to Kedushas Tefillin. He's thinking about jokes, he's thinking about levity and brevity and all this kind of stuff. Maybe he's thinking about a rayas chas v'shalom. He doesn't have the right mental state. And that irreverent state that he's in is antithetical to Kedushas Tefillin. But according to the Rosh and Rabbeinu Yonah, the fact that right now you're thinking about food that you're eating or sleep that you're sleeping, that doesn't constitute a Hesed Hadas. So we're going to paskin like the Rosh and Rabbeinu Yonah.
Why are some people wearing it like all day? They can't be thinking of their tefillin.
So we have to rely on the Rosh and Rabbeinu Yonah. What do they say? That as long as you're not involved in something that's very heavy, you're thinking about something that is totally secular, totally mundane, you're thinking about jokes and that kind of stuff. As long as you're not in that category, if you're, in the middle category, the neutral category, then you're not violating the
And what's the
Kedushas.
reason for wearing it several hours a day or whatever?
Well, that's really
Well, the mitzvah of tefillin is a constant, perpetual mitzvah. Chazal tell us that in our time, since it's very difficult for us to be connected to the tefillin constantly, and we're afraid that you might fall asleep and you might eat, back in the day, they were very careful about this. The zehirus, the care, the meticulous care for tefillin was so great that there was no no imposition that, we cannot allow you to wear tefillin the whole day. Those, by the way, who feel, and I know people who do, as I said in the old city, they feel that they can do it, they should be encouraged to do so. I remember when I was learning in yeshiva, I was 19 years old, I was pretty religious in those days, and every Friday I would wear tefillin almost the whole Friday, because Friday was a different schedule. I was just sitting and concentrating on my learning, and I felt that I could concentrate on the tefillin.
There's no Indian of like Mechse Kiyura, I mean, because it's not. Like,
well, again,
when I bring tourists to the old city, I see somewhere in film, like it's like
Right.
even religious people, they're not aware, especially American Jews, they're even aware that there's people in the
so
world.
I would
that
say,
do
Moshe,
such a
in my
thing.
humble opinion, those who are unaware, that's Amaratzis.
I'm saying like Rabbi Vadia passing, you don't wear your tzitzis out because of that. It's
Well,
like,
that's
Well,
also
again, I
different
don't know. I don't know about Rabbi Vadia.
No, but when did he give that psak?
I'm saying he only died
Again,
years ago.
Yura only
That's
applies
far don't wear
when a person is not obligated. There's no Yura if I'm obligated. The fact that you can't live up to the obligation or that you don't know about the obligation,
Well,
that's not Yura.
I'm saying so when Chazal limited it, do they said it's optionally
Right.
limited, or they say
No,
it's-
that's the chiyuv. The
it's-
ikar chiyuv, the Rambam writes it explicitly in Hilchos Tefillin, is to wear tefillin the
and
entire
those
day.
that kill them all bring down that we only wear it part of the day.
Today,
or-
Bisman Hazeh,
So-
maybe we should be more careful about it because maybe we're not.
So that's how the olam is knowing, wouldn't it? Then you can
I
make a
don't
case
think
that-
so.
no?
I think we still have the ikar mitzvah doraisa, which is to wear tefillin the whole day.
Uh-huh.
In any event, I wanted to talk to you a little bit about the
Yeah.
difference between Shal Yad and Shal Rosh. And this I heard many times from Rav Soloveitchik. He used to always claim that the Iker Kiddush of a person who's wearing tefillin comes from the Shal Rosh. The Gemara says on a pasuk, "V'ro kol amei aretz ki shem Hashem nikra leah elu tefillin Shal Rosh." Now watch what happens. Rashi interprets this Gemara in the following way. What does it mean that v'ro ki shem Hashem nikra leah? The Shem Hashem is made up of three letters. In this case, we talked about the name Shin, Dalid, Yud. Two out of those three letters are in the Shal Rosh. Why? Because there's a Shin on top of the Shal Rosh that's engraved. And then there's what's called the Kesher Shel Tefillin, which is in the shape of a Dalid. Now, again, I don't want to get into a very, very heavy issue because I don't want to say something that's not politically correct. But there are those who wear what's called a double Dalid in the back. My Rebbe said about that, it's out, completely out. There's no Elu different can find. Because Kesher Shel Tefillin, according to most Rishonim, is Halach L'Moshe Misina. We don't have any machlokus about Halach L'Moshe. But be that as it may, I'm just mentioning it in passing. And I noticed in the shul over here, everybody wears a dalet. I didn't see anyone wearing a double dalet. But in my day, when I was brought up, I saw many, many people who wore that double dalet. Now, what two letters?
It's a box. I don't know what you have, but if you have the dollar,
Think of
the
this
two
as
is
a
under
dollar,
that.
and this is
And
a
then one
dollar.
upside
You
down.
Sit like this.
So it looks like a square. You mean?
Yes,
Yeah.
it's not like a.
Yeah, they call it a double dalet.
Yeah.
But now, how many letters are on the Tefillin Shel Rosh? If you count the Shin and the Dalid, what percentage, so to speak, of Sha Dai is on the Tefillin Shel Rosh? 2 out of 3. The Shal Yad has a Yud, and that's the Ritzua that's shaped like a Yud, and it's curved into and facing towards the bias of the Shal Yad. So you now have one of the 3 letters of God's name on the Shal Yad, 2 out of the 3 letters on the Shal Rosh. Which do you think, again, make believe you know nothing about tefillin. Which tefillin should be put on first? Shal Yad or Shal Rosh?
You'd argue the
Well, if
Rosh.
it's-
Shal Rosh, because it's got the Iker Kedusha,
It's also the
and it's
shape
got
in the
2
back.
out of the 3 Shemos. So Shem Hashem Nikra Alecha really refers to tefillin Shal Rosh.
Also-
And the Gemara says it explicitly. Elu tefillin Shevarash.
But the pasuk-
However, the pasuk excellent says, "Ukshartem lios al yodecha, vayulatot fos beineinecha." So the Mefarshim want to understand if the kedusha of the Shal Rosh is that much greater and sanctifies a person, and like he's wearing the tzitz like a Kohen Gadol, why do we put on the tefillin Shal Yad first? Why did the Torah require us to put on the tefillin Shal Yad first?
Malam Kodesh.
Oh, so here we have a principle called Naseh v'Nishma. Listen carefully. This is one of the most powerful ideas I feel every day when I put on tefillin, if I concentrate. When Klal Yisrael accepted the Torah, there was first absolute commitment. They didn't know what was in the Torah. They didn't learn the Torah. There was no machshava. There was no shal rosh. It was purely shal yad. That's called nasa, an absolute, unconditional commitment to asiyas ha-mitzvahs. God, just tell me the mitzvahs. I'll figure out what they're about, what they mean later on. And when I put on the tefillin shal yad represents asiyah. And I'm basically declaring nasa. And then when I put on the shal rosh with my mind, I'm declaring nishma. It comes out that every time I put on tefillin, I'm re-experiencing Kabbalah Satorah. And therefore, it's not accidental that when a bar mitzvah boy thinks about the first mitzvah, when he prepares a drasha, it's always going to be about tefillin. I remember my father prepared me for my drasha. Again, I don't know how much I understood, but I said the drasha, and it was on tefillin. In fact, during Sfiras HaOmer, if you have a case of a child who was born on Sfiras HaOmer, which means his bar mitzvahs during the Sfira, there's no doubt in my mind he's going to be mafalpel whether he can continue with the Sfira with the bracha or not continue, because what he did until that point is a katan and so forth and so on. The bottom line is, Rabbosai, that what you see here in front of your eyes is a Kabbalah Satorah. It's a Har Sinai in miniature, both for the bar mitzvah boy and for all of Klal Yisrael. Every time we put on tefillin, we put on the shal yad first and the shal rosh. The Kabbalists add another dimension to this. They say the following: Shin Dalid without a yud is not a good word. It's a shade. I don't want to say it out loud, but it's a demon. And we don't want to have a shade on our head. So how do we avoid having a shade on our head? Number one, we'll put on the shal yad first, so the yud is already there. Number two, we'll take the shal rosh off first, so that if we would take the shal yad off first, then again we're left with shade. And therefore, that's going to be the Seder Advan. I want to talk to you a little bit, because we're rushed for time, with a concept called chalitzas hatfilin.
Isn't it just simply Malin B'Kodesh? If the Shal Rosh, if you drop it, you have to fast, you don't. So you put the one in lesser Kedusha. And...
It's a good point, Moshe. Let me think about it.
Yeah.
I don't want to stop now.
I know the policy about you.
Yeah, I think
it's
you have to know when Milan B'Kodesh works and when
right,
it doesn't.
I don't know.
Beit Shammai.
Right.
Is it automatically less?
I think
Yeah,
Milan B'Kodesh. I think Milan B'Kodesh works when you have two separate machayvim that are not related to each other. Like you have one day and another day. Each day is different and has its own machayev. Like we say Hallel on every day of Chanukah, like we say Hallel on every day of Sukkot. So then we say Milan B'Kodesh. But anyway, that's an excellent point. I want to talk to you about something that I think people are unaware of. And my Rebbe, excuse me, used to talk about it all the time. And that's called chalitzas hatefillin. We talk about donning the tefillin, anochas hatefillin. We make a bracha on anocha. What about taking off the tefillin? And believe it or not, back in the day, at the time of the Shas, they used to make a bracha on chalitzas hatefillin. And that's shomer chukav. What does it mean? Tefillin has two parts to it. One is the positive mitzvah putting on tefillin. The other is the shmira of the tefillin, to guarantee that the tefillin are maintained, b'kedusha. When I take off my tefillin, I'm doing so because I want to observe and protect the kedusha of tefillin. Today we don't make the bracha. The bracha somehow fell into disuse. But the Beis Yosef quotes one opinion that when you take off your tefillin, you should recite Yehi Ratzon Milfanecha Shani Shomer Eschukas HaTefillin, that I'm protecting the kedusha of tefillin, so that even if we don't make a bracha, we make some sort of recitation. And if that be the case, then when we ask ourselves the question, at what point should we take off our tefillin, we have to be very careful. The Shulchan Aruch paskins that we shouldn't take off our tefillin until after Ashrei Uvolot Tziyun. Uvolot Tziyun has kedusha in it. It's a separate kedusha, and we should be wearing our tefillin during that kedusha. The sanctity of that tefillah merges with the sanctity of tefillin to create one entity of kedusha, and we shouldn't be taking off our tefillin before that. The Ramah goes a step further, and he says that we should keep on the tefillin for Kaddish, meaning the last Kaddish is also a matter of kedusha, and therefore the tefillin should be on us. Now, after kedusha, we're ready for chalitzas hatfilin. It could be, again, don't quote me on this because I didn't find anyone to support me on this, that during chalitzat tefillin one should not be mafsik, because since the chalitza the tefillin, both the shalyad and the shalrosh, is to maintain and observe the kedusha of the tefillin, one should do it in one ma'isa chalitza, and he should not be mafsik in between. I want to talk to you a little bit about the word totofos. The Torah distinguishes between shalyad and shalrosh in the following way. The Torah says, with regard to shalyad, what's the pasuk again? For hayu, no, that's the second half of the pasuk. What's the first? Oh, kshartem lios al yodecha. Sorry, ukshartem lios al yodecha. The emphasis is on the action. What is the action here? Kshira. And again, there are different minhagim. According to some minhagim, when we tighten the tefillin shal yad onto the zroa, that itself is a kiyum of the mitzvah of kshartem. Others say that the kshira really refers to hanocha, and there are many times in Tanakh where the word kshira means hanocha, to attach one thing on top of the other. And therefore the bracha is asher kitcharim etzosav tzivanu lehaniach tefillin. But really lehaniach tefillin means liksharas tefillin. When it comes to the shalrosh, we have a different bracha entirely. Those who make a bracha on the shalrosh will recite al mitzvahs tefillin. But as Rabbeinu Tam points out, the lahaniach is chal on both the shalyad and the shalrosh. And therefore, if you are mafsik, you're going to have to repeat the lahaniach for the shalrosh. The shalrosh gets a different bracha of its own. Why? V'hayu l'totafos b'neinecha. What does v'hayu mean? V'hayu means and they shall be. You're describing a state of being, not an action. The tefillin shalyad really is fulfilled the minute that you put it on. If I would take off my tefillin shalyad immediately after I put it on, I would fulfill the barest minimum, not the greatest ideal mitzvah, but the minimum mitzvah and the chiyuv of uksharta. Not so in the case of shalrosh.
Without even winding it? Just like by...
No, I mean to say whatever you have to do with the shalyad.
Okay.
But in the case of shalrosh, the mitzvah is not putting on the shalrosh. The mitzvah is having the shalrosh on you. And in this sefer called Hegioni Alocha, if we have time, I want to show you something brilliant in the name of the Rogatchover about this concept of v'hayu. But as it is, I would claim that v'hayu means the kedusha of the person while he's wearing tefillin. The kshira, getting the tefillin on the body, is just a hechsher. It's just a way of getting the tefillin to sanctify myself. But ultimately, like the Kohen Gadol wearing the tzitz, my mitzvah is v'hayu, to have the tefillin on my body. And that's why the ro amei haaretz ki shem Hashem nikra alecha, the shem Hashem of the tefillin shal rosh is through the v'hayu, through having the tefillin on your body. I want to talk to you a little bit about the two shitos of what tefillin is all about. That's Rashi and Rabbeinu Tam. Rashi understood from the Gemara Menachos that the four parshios have to be put into the bottom, into the compartments, kisidram, the same way they're in the Torah. We have four parshios of tefillin in the Torah. We start with Kadesh, and then we go to V'hoya, and then we have the two parshios of Kriyat Shema, V'hoyim Shema, and Shema and Avoyim and Shema. So Rashi has it in that order. Rabbeinu Tam understood that the first two parshios have to be from the right to the left, and the next two parshios have to combine the two V'hoya, because the second parsha V'hoya Kiviyacha starts with the V'hoya, and the third parsha, which is really the fourth sequentially in the Torah, which is V'hoyim Shema, also starts with the word V'hoya. So we want to put the two V'hoyas together. Now the Shulchan Aruch wants to know, A, how do we paskin in this machlokas, and B, should one try to fulfill both opinions? The Shulchan Aruch decides, based on the Rambam, that we should paskin like Rashi, and we're going to wear Rashi's tefillin. And the seder of the four parashas would be Keseder HaKos. However, the Shulchan Aruch says that it's a very good idea recommended to wear the tefillin of Rabbeinu Tam. To be Yotzei Zayin, the sheet of Rabbeinu Tam.
What they do before Rashi.
I don't know. Actually, you're a tour guide, so maybe you could tell me when
We
they
have
found the
tefillin.
tefillin
We did
in
at
the
Sodom,
shrine of the book, right?
but it's just the batim.
Oh, they don't have the parashas. Okay, so we
Right.
can't know for sure. My assumption
No, it's-
is,
it's
Moshe,
not.
and I don't know if I'm right, that historically both minhagim
So
date
small.
back to who knows
So
how
small,
long.
it's hard to even decipher.
However, the poskim say that not everyone should be wearing Rabbeinu Tam's tefillin. And that's for two reasons. One reason is because of the Vilna Gaon. The Vilna Gaon says the following: if you're going to be choshesh for Rabbeinu Tam, then I'm going to give you another 64 shitos that you should be choshesh for. In tefillin, there's so many different nuances and issues that maybe you should be wearing 64 pairs of tefillin. Now, Rav Scheinberg Zichron Livracha used to wear 64 pairs of tzitzits.
So the Rabbeinu
But-
Tam Shabbos also Havdalah for.
So I don't know. That's one reason why, because every time you take off the tefillin shel Rashi and you put on the tefillin shel Rabbeinu Tam, you're in a sense removing yourself from tefillin if we pass it like Rashi. So since we pass it like Rashi, why steal yourself, rob yourself of that extra minute of a kiyum of tefillin if every minute of tefillin is so glorious and so important? The other reason for it,
Did
yeah,
Rabbi
people that are wearing
Soloveitchik
tzitzit.
wear? I thought Rabbi Rakefet had told us
that he did.
that the Lubavitcher Rebbe asked him when he went there why he doesn't wear them. He said, because I don't know anyone in the world that can write them properly. And the Rebbe said, I will send you my personal sofer, which he did. So Rabbi Rakefet told us and told us that the Rav started wearing Rabbeinu Tam after the Rebbe sent him his personal sofer.
Wow, that's an amazing story. Is that in the book? You know, the Rav.
I heard it from Rabbi Kefet.
Right, so you don't know if it's in the
class.
book.
Yeah.
Okay, great.
There are those that are wearing them both at the same time.
Right, that's interesting. That's Al Pi Kabbalah, I think. Yeah. Okay, now let's ask the following question: are all the parshios in one bias or in four different batas? Yeah, go ahead.
There's two reasons why. One, you said was the Vilna Gaon.
Oh, I'll get back to it in just a minute. Believe it. How are we doing on the clock? I just want to.
So,
How many people have to? Bob, you said you have to catch Myriv.
I don't
I need mine.
You need Myriv. So if we end at, let's say, 2 minutes to 10, yeah, I mean it's fine. It's just a.
right
Yeah.
now.
So wait, what did I want to tell you? Oh yeah, how many batim are there? So we know that in the Tefillin Shel Rosh there are 4 batim, and each one of the 4 parshios is inserted into another bias. It's really interesting because there are certain oros, sa'aros that have to wrap around each one of the batim. I'm sorry, each one of the parshios, and then they loop them through a hole, and you'll see if you look carefully. Hair is coming out. Rav Kaplan in his Godman and Tefillin has an entire chapter on that hair that comes out through the Shel Rosh. But be that as it may, that's with regard to the Tefillin Shel Rosh. It has 4 compartments. Each one gets a parsha. Tefillin Shel Yad is different. It's one cloth in the bias, not divided up, and all 4 parashas are written on the one cloth. How did Chazal know such a thing? If it's halach l'Moshe b'Sinai, so be it. But Chazal derived from the word totafos. It's very interesting. The word totafos is a word that comes from other languages, African and so forth and so on, and it means 2 plus 2. Totafos. So what are the 2 and the 2? 2 compartments for 2 parshas that are written in Sefer Shmos, and 2 compartments for 2 parshas that are written in Sefer Dvarim. Why did the Torah confuse us by writing 2 plus 2? Why didn't the Torah just say 4? So that's a pella that the Torah went out of its way to use other languages. Where do we find such a thing? That the Torah uses other languages. It's very rare. Like, for example, Lavan says Yagar Sadusa, which comes from Aramaic, but you can count it on one hand. And Dafka in Tefillin. And the Malbim wants to claim that the word totafos, even though the Gemara identifies it with different countries, is really a word in Lashon Kodesh. And he says that at the time of Bavel, of the Dara Flaga, God took the nations of the world, scattered them around, and each nation took Lashon Kodesh and was bastardize it. It worked the Lashon Kodesh, but the word itself, Chas v'Shalom, is not originally from another language. It's from Lashon Kodesh, and all languages come from Lashon Kodesh. Be that as it may, what I have here in front of me is a summary of the Tumim Rabbana. It's very nice the way he puts it. He has for each chapter a list of Makoros and Shulchan Aruch and so forth. And then at the end of each chapter, he gives you a list, which is like a summary of everything that he covered. So I made only one copy because I figured I'll ask you if you want more copies. And then my copier is not in great shape. I mean, I don't know if I could dream of a fantasy that we'll have a photocopy machine, but be that as it may, if anybody is interested, it's really beautiful. Like, I'll just give you a quick example before you have to run. You have 2 more minutes. He says the following: Sikum Tefillin Shel Rashi Rabbeinu Tam. Number 1, Rashi has it Kadesh, V'Hoya, Shma, and V'Hoyim Shamoah. Rabbeinu Tam says Kadesh, V'Hoyim Shamoah. So far, he's like Rashi. And then V'Hoyim Kiviyach, excuse me. Then V'Hoyim Shamoah, and then Shma. The Rambam, the Chinuch, paskin like Rashi. The Rosh says Yirei Shamayim, Yetzei Yedei Shneim. The Shulchan Aruch says the Minhag HaOlam is Kirashi, and only someone, and we have to see how to describe that, that's Yiddi's question, who's a Yirei Shamayim. He knows about himself, he's a Yirei Shamayim, he's very careful and meticulous about everything. He could be Yotzei Shneim. Now, the Maril came along and said that only someone who's mefursam b'chasidus should wear the tefillin of Rabbeinu Tam. Apparently, the Rebbe thought that Rav Soloveitchik was mefursam b'chasidus. The Mishnah Berurah writes that afilu im rotzol anicham acharat tefillah. He finished davening. Now he wants to put on Rabbeinu Tam. He should only do so if he's mefursam b'chasidus. And again, the Hasidim feel they're all mefursam b'chasidus, and therefore they all wear Rabbeinu Tam. He says, "Bismanenu rabim noagim laniach tefillin de Rabbeinu Tam, v'lachein ein bekach yura." Notice he's not making a statement about himself. Oh, I'm great. I'm mefursam b'chasidus, because the minhag already has been widespread to wear Rabbeinu Tam's tefillin. In my family, there's a machlokas to this day whether my father wore Rabbeinu Tam's tefillin or not, and there yesh deos lakan ulakan. But I'm just giving you a flavor of what you could get here in one little half a page, a summary. Here's a summary of Kedushas HaTefillin. Kedushas HaAdam Shemunachos Alav Tefillin. The Iser of Hesech Hadas from Tefillin. Sheina im Tefillin, sleeping in Tefillin. What Sheinas Aroi, what Sheinas Kfa. Achilo Shasiyah min Tefillin. And then he talks about the Tefillin themselves. You're not allowed to hang them up on a peg, because that's a violation of Kedushas Tefillin. You're not allowed to be sleeping on a bed and put the Tefillin on the bed. And then the question is, what if you have them in a tick? And so forth and so on. All this is on one page. And then he has Hanochas HaTefillin Ve'habra. Okay, then, Rabbosai? So we'll stop here. And I hope we covered at least some of the Rashi Prakim of Tefillin, a subject matter which you can probably spend months on. But just to get a little bit of a flavor of some of the issues in Tefillin. And I was thinking maybe next time, I think also, you mentioned Borer, Meleches Borer. Did you mention something like that?
I'm just giving examples of standalone topics.
Okay, if you could help me, I only have the first volume of the RJJ series, Halach and Contemporary Side.
Yeah.
Do you have any of the other volumes? I looked at the first volume and it just didn't, it didn't resonate with me. I didn't see anything in that list in the table of contents that.
There's an index. I think Earthweb has them all. I'll try to.
Sure, they're all online by now.
Yeah.
Yeah, so if you could send me a link or something for next time.
We
But
can
theoretically,
suggest
please,
topics.
that would be great. Just write to me what topics. And by the way, I think this is a good time, no, to meet? And we want to thank Rav Moshe for organizing it and the heat and the lighting and everything else.
It was
Called me like in the middle of
selfish.
listening to it, so I'm sorry if I came up as rude. I was like, I know
I know,
meeting of
I-
like.
if it was-
Well,
if it was-
according to
I've
Rabbeinu
heard
Tam, it
it's-
would seem
I can't
that
say
when they
it,
write the
but it's-
parshas on one
So then
cloth for the Shaliyah, they should follow.
Or
Yeah.
two-
Correct.
Yeah.
I have it, it's hard,
Go ahead.
I'm not as young as him.
Good night, Joe.
Thank you so much. Okay.
Work American English.
Yeah, that's right.
We're gonna know, but I'd like to ask you a question. That's next to the Rav and Rosh Chodesh taking office tomorrow.
Ah, okay.
Also, I
Yeah, there
did
was-
tell me on my birthday.